Welcome into another episode here on Zion Media. Today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different than what we normally talk about. What we're going to be talking about is the Antichrist, a man by the name of Peter Thiel, who is involved with government surveillance stuff. He is the co-founder of a company called Palantir that does that, and his lectures on the Antichrist, which actually seem to be describing somewhat what his company is doing, which is pretty weird unless you understand karmic retribution, which I talked about in another video. But before we get into that, just make sure that if you do want to get notifications on future uploads, to hit that bell and to leave a like and a comment down below. Now, to get into it, I'm going to share screens. Right now, this Peter Thiel guy, he's been blowing up on the internet for like at least a year. I've seen people talking about him, thinking that his Antichrist lectures are really suspicious and creepy. And now he's in Rome, which, if you don't know, Rome is where the Catholic Church is and where the Vatican is. And he's even gotten the attention of the Catholic Church with this. And he is giving lectures on the Antichrist, like he has done. But this lecture is a private lecture, it looks like, on the Antichrist, which makes it even more suspicious. Why is he in Rome giving lectures about the Antichrist, which, according to his lectures, he seems to believe the Antichrist will come in the name of peace and safety to take away our rights. And his company, Palantir, is involved with government surveillance stuff for peace and safety. And a lot of it lines up with what he's warning about. And I'm getting notifications on this phone. I'm going to turn this thing off. I get a million text messages on my phone. And so it is kind of annoying sometimes. But before we get into that, sorry, I lost my train of thought because I was getting these notifications. We're going to share screens, and I am going to show you a little bit about this Peter Thiel guy. So essentially, his company Palantir, which, funny enough, Palantir, the name of it comes from Lord of the Rings, and it is the evil orb that Saruman gets information from. So this evil orb is called Palantir, from what I understand. I'm not super big into Lord of the Rings. I've watched it, but I didn't know the name of the orb. But apparently, yeah, Palantir. And that is also the name of Peter Thiel's company, which, to pull this up here, this is what AI Overview says. Palantir Technology builds software platforms, notably Gotham, Foundry, AIP, that enable organization to integrate and analyze visual, massive, fragmented datasets. Originally serving defense and intelligence agencies, Palantir now helps government and commercial clients detect patterns, optimize operations, and make data-driven decisions. So that's sort of what the summarizing is, but what's actually going on if you read into Palantir, so Gotham, for example, used by government, defense, and law enforcement for intelligence analysis and identifying hidden patterns. What they do is they have access to all this information, phone records, anything out on the internet, all this stuff, and they piece that together with AI to obtain information and to figure things out, right? Like supercomputer level quantum computing, and which can be useful for solving crimes and stuff, right? But what's suspicious is that Peter Thiel, this tech billionaire, he co-founded PayPal. He is also one of the co-founders of Palantir, and he's giving these lectures on the Antichrist, which he again claims will come in the name of peace and safety, right? Which, yeah, it's pretty suspicious. But sorry, I'm just reading a bit more of this Palantir stuff. It makes you wonder what's going on. And do you think Latter-day Saints are prepared for what's coming? What do you think the Antichrist could be? Because the term the Antichrist is actually never really used in the scripture. We have a beast in the book of Revelation, which Joseph Smith described as a congregation of worldly nations together, right? So not necessarily a single individual being, but in the book of Isaiah, we have this king of Assyria figure who many would call the Antichrist in Isaiah, that seems to be a leader of these nations. We have the beast and the little horn in the book of Daniel. And in Revelation, along with the beast, we have a false prophet, right? So the sort of Protestant view of the Antichrist is, I'm going to say it's completely fabricated, right? And in fact, some of the scriptures I've seen that people use to talk about the Antichrist is actually describing God doing certain things to chastise or punish his people, right? So that's Palantir. Now, to go into these lectures, so like I said, he's in Rome right now, and we'll just pull up the CNN article to sort of skim through this a little bit. So, agree, whatever. Peter Thiel's secret lectures on Antichrist in Rome spark debate. Peter Thiel, the billionaire venture capitalist and MAGA donor, is in Rome this week for a series of private lectures on the Antichrist. It is an event at the Vatican, and the Pope are treating it with caution. So this has gotten the attention of the Pope, that there's this dude who's he's involved with government surveillance stuff, and he's giving lectures saying that the Antichrist is going to be some sort of governmental surveillance type thing. Thiel's talks are closed to the media and taking place in an undisclosed location. An invitation seen by the Associated Press says the co-founder of PayPal and Palantir Technologies will focus on the Antichrist, a figure in Christian teaching who comes to oppose Jesus Christ before the second coming. Okay? But the appearance of Thiel on Vatican doorstep has raised eyebrows, given the tensions between Thiel's thinking and that of Pope Leo XIV. I don't know Roman numerals. Catholic institutions have distanced themselves from the lecture series, which continues through Wednesday. Right? So again, if it's just some guy giving lectures on the Antichrist, it's like maybe this guy genuinely is concerned. We could even argue, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, that Peter Thiel is involved in this stuff because he wants to get in that place before the Antichrist can. And I don't even fully know if he's actually like a religious person. He might see the Antichrist as a concept that is an inevitable thing that will rise up. I don't care about Capital One Venture card. So it's fascinating that we see this stuff, and that this is also happening right after the Epstein files come out. So we have the Department of Justice of the United States who release publicly documents where they are admitting that celebrities, politicians on both sides of the aisle, so this isn't a Democrat versus Republican thing, that they are ritualistically abusing children and doing satanic rituals, essentially, or occult rituals of some sort on this island. And there's a description of that. I've also shown a couple times this document from the Epstein files. I've read it, and I might read it again, where it is going in depth describing that these people, and again, this is from the official Department of Justice website, who do this stuff. They literally believe that outside entities are possessing them and that they are feeding off the energy of children, right? And for context of my knowledge of things, before I was ever really Mormon or anything, I was into all sorts of spiritual things. I'm still very curious. I love just learning new things and trying to understand other people's perspectives. Anytime I see somebody, like if I'm doing sales and I see that they have like some sort of spiritual tattoo, I ask them about their beliefs. I ask them, why they believe that, what things they've experienced that cause them to believe that. I'm a very curious person when it comes to that stuff. But I understand how these spiritual beliefs work, right? And in a last video, I had some guy who was like accusing me of teaching the occult because I mentioned astral projecting as something that on the CIA official website, they admit is a real thing. I wasn't, encouraging people to astral project. I was simply saying the government says it's real, right? As evidence of the supernatural being real. So we have that coming out. We have the war in Iran, which I'm going to go a little bit more into, but I have this pulled up right here where, again, we mentioned this in our last live stream, but there are troops from the military, all sorts of reports coming in saying that they were told that Donald Trump is anointed by Jesus Christ to cause Armageddon, which is that final battle in the Bible, essentially, where this is the battle before the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, I don't know. No, I'm not going to say that Donald Trump has literally been anointed by Jesus Christ. I don't trust him. I don't trust any politician, especially after the Epstein files came out, and there are allegations against people on both sides, including him in the Epstein files. Could he be a double agent or something, like many would like to think? I don't know. But we also have people who were commenting on that last video saying that they believe Donald Trump is the Davidic servant, which I really don't think so, and I think that deserves a whole video of its own. But the fact is, our government is saying this. They are saying that this war is to bring Armageddon. Now, do you know what the Israeli government is saying? So, Netanyahu, yeah, Iran, Messiah. So I'm not going to play this whole video. I was going to try and download it. But Netanyahu is saying, the reports are saying that they are going to usher in the Messiah's return. That's a mistranslation of what he's saying. The Jews don't believe the Messiah is returning. They believe that the Messiah hasn't come. And what he's saying is that this war is going to usher in the Messianic age. That's what he's saying. So people in government, they believe these things. And Peter Thiel, who is very connected to people like Jared Kushner, who is connected to Donald Trump. He's the son-in-law of Donald Trump. He's talking about this Antichrist stuff, which, again, this is one reason why I personally wouldn't trust Donald Trump, especially because I believe that the Antichrist is not going to be somebody pretending to be the Jesus Christ of 2,000 years ago, but is going to be like a false Davidic servant figure. Because who is it that the Jews are waiting for? Well, they are waiting for a mortal man who comes as a modern-day King David. He establishes Zion, and he gathers the tribes of Israel and builds a temple. That's what they believe their Messiah, that their anointed one that they're waiting for is. And that is a description of the end times David that Joseph Smith talked about. So I think that if there is an Antichrist-like figure that deceives people, they are going to think that he is the servant in Isaiah, and that he is the branch from the book of Zechariah who builds a temple to Jehovah. And this sort of idea is why we have so many Protestants who think that the Antichrist builds the third temple. Even though it's a prophecy that this man called Branch, this David, will build a temple. It doesn't say the third temple, but it says a temple. But we see this sort of messianic fever, and I think it's a coincidence that Dune is coming out right around this time. But let's see a little bit of what Peter Thiel actually has to say. So, without further ado, Peter Thiel.
Question.
Oh, that's the wrong thing on Savage. Here, add this.
Is that, well, it's you're an investor in AI. You're deeply invested in Palantir, in military technology, in technologies of surveillance, in technologies of warfare, and so on, right? And it just seems to me that when you tell me a story about the Antichrist coming to power and using the fear of technological change to sort of impose order on the world, I feel like that Antichrist would maybe be using the tools that you were building, right? Like,
so there's that right there. Like, look at that little smirk on his face. It's like, I think the Antichrist will be using the tools yours, and kind of smirks. And for context, I can have a whole video talking about what karmic retribution is, but there is a belief system in what, let's call it the occult. It is more so like they believe it's like a universal law that, and this is a real thing that they believe. So imagine I wanted to poison you. This is what karmic retribution is. If I put poison in this drink and I gave it to you and I didn't tell you, I just poisoned you. So there's going to be spiritual consequences for doing this. And I can pull up sources for where people believe this and all sorts of stuff. I could do a whole video on it. But if I wrote in the fine print or somehow said, I'm going to poison that drink, if I somehow put the information out there that I am planning on doing that, then spiritually speaking, I believe that you, by drinking the poison, did it to yourself, and that there won't be spiritual consequences for it. So it's like a loophole in spiritual laws, essentially. That is what the belief on karmic retribution that many of these people have is. So when we have a guy like this talking, who is heavily involved in surveillance stuff, talking about the Antichrist, you have to ask yourself, is he actually concerned about the Antichrist? Because I'm willing to see that. Like, he could actually be concerned about something like this. Or is he just telling us what his plans are? So that if people don't do anything, well, we just gave them consent to do it.
Wouldn't the Antichrist be like, great?
And he's like saying that, like, wouldn't the Antichrist be like, great, like that Peter Thiel's research is actually going to help the Antichrist.
You know, we're not going to have any more technological progress, but I really like what Palantir has done so far, right?
Yeah,
I mean, isn't that a concern? Wouldn't that be the irony of history would be that the man publicly worrying about the Antichrist accidentally hastens his or her arrival?
There are all these different scenarios. I obviously don't think that that's what I'm doing.
I mean, to be clear, I don't think that's what you're doing either. I'm just interested in how you get to a world willing to submit to permanent authoritarian rule.
Well, but again, there are these different gradations of this we can describe, but is this so preposterous, what I've just told you, as a broad account of the stagnation that the entire world has submitted for 50 years to peace and safetyism? This is 1 Thessalonians 5:3. The slogan of the Antichrist is peace and safety, and we've submitted.
So that's where he's going in, that the slogan of the Antichrist is peace and safety. And what does that mean? Is that if there is an Antichrist or a false prophet or a beast system that comes about to oppress us, as the book of Revelation seems to suggest there is something, then it will come in the name of peace and safety. Or in other words, giving up your rights for security, giving up freedom for security. And what Peter Thiel is basically saying here is that, haven't we already done this for the past 50 years? And I actually agree with this point a lot. And I actually have had thoughts of making a video on this very topic before. But what if the Babylonian captivity in the book of Isaiah, that the servant leads this end times exodus from, what if we're at the very least partially already in it? Or already in it in some form? Because right now, today, we pay more in taxes than a medieval serf did. Like, they had more ownership and in some ways more rights than us today. And one thing that certain conspiracies that I've looked into that end up being confirmed would suggest is that there are things that go on economically which purposely inflate the currency so we have to pay more. That they cause inflation on purpose to trap us in this Babylon system of waging away. And they give us things like the Super Bowl or drugs and alcohol and partying and stuff. And this goes to what the word of wisdom actually is about, where I think many people are like Pharisees when they come to the word of wisdom, and I have personal reasons for that. But in the actual revelation Joseph Smith received, he said, this is to protect you from the plans of conspiring men in the last days. So we have a culture of people who are just numbed up to all this stuff. And this is what caused me to have a sort of, I guess, spiritual awakening that really, it's been like that my whole life. Like, it's always been off to me. And when I was 15 years old in 2016, that's when I started to have revelatory spiritual experiences. And in 2020, it went full on with COVID, when the stuff happened with COVID, where we now have confirmation that COVID-19 was 100% leaked from a lab in Wuhan, China. And in the Epstein files, we have Bill Gates, who was heavily connected to that stuff going on with COVID-19, talking about, with emails with Jeffrey Epstein, how they would need to manufacture a pandemic for certain reasons, which is what people were saying even before the Epstein files were released, is that COVID-19 was a manufactured thing. And that's not to say it wasn't a real virus. That's to say that it was a virus that was likely made in a laboratory and released to the public on purpose. And certain things about that suggest that it was done to test how obedient we would be to being told to do certain things for the sake of peace and safety. So what Peter Thiel's saying here is right. We are already in this place. And again, this is what caused me to have a spiritual awakening, because I began looking into this stuff. I began receiving revelation, and I would find on government websites, on the WEF website, on the United Nations website, them admitting what their plans are. I would find in certain worldwide government agencies talking, and I can show the sources for this, by the way, talking about how there is a global depopulation agenda, which we're going to go into because I'm just being guided by the Spirit here of what the Lord wants me to say. So when you look at these things, it starts to scratch your head, and I'm going to show the evidence. I'm not just saying this stuff. I'm not just all talk. I'm going to show you. And before I do that, here is another video by Peter Thiel. So I'm going to remove this one, add this one.
Yeah, well,
Yes?
I don't know. I would
This is a long hesitation. It's just a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in
Should the
this.
human race survive?
Yeah.
So what he's kind of being asked about here, if I understand the context of this video, is like this idea of transhumanism, that man will merge with machines, right? This idea, it also involves AI, involves other stuff. Interestingly, about a year ago, there was a statement released by the church that they would never use, and I'm going to go into that, they would never use AI to write conference talks or to essentially recreate Jesus. So could there be people who will try to convince that there is a new God through AI? That's an idea I've heard, that the Antichrist will be this AI God, if you will, that knows everything. Could Palantir be marking the way to this? Interestingly enough, like I said, Dune Messiah, that trailer just dropped. Could be a coincidence. And depending on your perspective, Dune is either a movie about an Antichrist or a Davidic servant type figure. And I would say, I think that the way the prophecies work in Dune is exactly how real prophecies work, that God makes this stuff happen and sends forth the servant to fulfill those things. But essentially, in Dune, there's this idea that there was a great war, I believe, beforehand, because I haven't read the books, and that AI was a terrible, terrible threat, and it had to be wiped out or something. And there is, in their religion, in their vows, there is a commandment, thou shalt not make machine in the likeness of a man's mind, right? And so Paul Atreides, who's this young, edgier Joseph Smith-esque like figure. He's like, imagine if you combine Joseph Smith with Anakin Skywalker from Star Wars. And he is becoming this Messiah that they are waiting for and waging this war and having to fulfill these prophecies. And that's kind of what Dune is about. But it's interesting that it aligns with that stuff. And we have this idea in Dune with these messianic prophecies where AI is like a forbidden thing that's in the religion. Like, don't do that. So very interesting stuff. I've even heard people theorize that anciently, and I'm not saying I believe this, but anciently they might have had more advanced technology that got wiped out, and maybe the Tower of Babel was trying to do something like that. Again, I don't believe this, but I've heard people mention it before. So
Okay.
But I also would I also would like us to radically solve these problems.
Right.
And so, it's always, I don't know, um, yeah, transhumanism is this, the ideal was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body. And there's a critique of, let's say, the trans people in a sexual context, or I don't know, a transvestite is someone who changes their clothes and cross dresses, and a transsexual is someone where you change your, I don't know, penis into a vagina, and we can then debate how well those surgeries work. But we want more transformation than that. It's the critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's, man, it's so pathetically little. And okay, we want more than cross dressing or changing your sex organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body. And then Orthodox Christianity, by the way, the critique Orthodox Christianity has of this is these things don't go far enough. Like, that transhumanism is just changing your body, but you also need to transform your soul, and you need to transform your whole self. And so,
Right. But
this
the
is
other,
where,
wait. Sorry. I generally agree with what I think is your belief that religion should be a friend to science and ideas of scientific progress. I think any idea of divine providence has to encompass the fact that we have progressed and achieved and done things that would have been unimaginable to our ancestors. But it still also seems like, yeah, the promise of Christianity in the end is you get the perfected body and the perfected soul through God's grace. And the person who tries to do it on their own with a bunch of machines is likely to end up as a dystopian character.
well, it's let's articulate this.
And you're going to have a heretical form of Christianity, right? That says something else.
I don't know. I think the word nature does not occur once in the Old Testament, and so if you and there is a word in which, a sense in which, the way I understand the the Judeo-Christian inspiration is, it is about transcending nature. It is about overcoming things. And
Okay, so here's what's standing out here to me is that the host who's interviewing Peter Thiel, he brings up that this idea of advancing through technology, through transhumanism by Christianity would be considered heretical to a lot of it. And then Peter Thiel goes on to defend it. Well, actually, I mean, the Bible never actually says it's a natural transformation, which technically is true, right? But again, we have to go back to this guy is heavily involved in surveillance stuff, and he's warning that the Antichrist will be involved in surveillance stuff, right? So, very interesting there as well. If the Antichrist is going to perform false miracles, per se, what if a false resurrection is that they're going to clone people? I'm just like pulling stuff out. But imagine it's like the Antichrist comes, and then Charlie Kirk is suddenly back, and they're like, Charlie Kirk, he resurrected. I don't know. Or maybe I've heard people say they even faked his death. I don't know. But imagine that what if that is the plan? I don't know. So we need to understand more, but I would say transhumanism is less of a threat, though I remember Alex Jones, who is a very controversial figure, I will say, right? For many reasons. But he was spot on about Jeffrey Epstein. He was telling us this like 20 years ago, 10 years ago. And in those same talks, when he's talking about the elites going to Epstein's island and performing satanic rituals and taking drugs so that they can see entities, he talks about some of this stuff too, that I believe he says that believe in this transhumanism stuff, and that they believe there's going to be a breakaway civilization that breaks off from humanity and into this sort of transhumanism-esque thing and merges with machines. And that is what the entities that, again, in these satanic rituals that are feeding on children, and I can pull that up from the Epstein files and read it again, are teaching them. They are teaching them this advanced knowledge that, and again, what Alex Jones is claiming in these videos, I've seen like clips from Joe Rogan and stuff, is that a lot of our advanced knowledge on technology is coming from essentially fallen angels or demons. And I'm going to have a whole nother episode likely that I plan on talking about that when we can get guests on, because there's this idea that what we call aliens may actually be fallen angels, part of this deception. And we know as soon as the Iran war started, Donald Trump, he came out saying that they were going to release information about aliens. And we also have the government, as of a few days ago, who they purchased the address for alien and aliens.gov. But could there be good aliens and bad aliens? Because we also have this idea of Ezekiel's wheel in the Old Testament, where Ezekiel, the prophet, he describes what he sees God and his angels riding upon, the chariot, he calls it, and it is a wheel with little circles on it. So could that have been a UFO? I don't know. Is it some magical heavenly thing that God has? I don't know. But that is a theory a lot of people have. But another theory is that there's no such thing as aliens, that it is going to be some sort of Antichrist deception to make us not believe in God, that machine is God, that man and machine merging is how we become gods. I don't know. But that is the idea that seems to be being put forward here. So let's get back to that video real quick.
And, and the closest thing you can say to nature is that people are fallen, and that's the natural thing in a Christian sense, is that you're messed up. And that's true. But, there's some ways that, with God's help, you are supposed to transcend that and overcome that.
So could it be that what we have coming is going to be faith, as I was talking about in that video about the CIA documents, where they're talking about consciousness controlling reality, where there will be those who have the faith to perform miraculous things, and then there will be those who use technology to fake it. I don't know. Could certain beings, like terrestrial beings, have access to greater technology? I know Michael Rush, he has a whole book about that, where he thinks that the fallen angels are aliens and they're going to have advanced technology. But he also thinks that John the Beloved and the prophets from the North Country are going to come with advanced technology as well. But again, I can save that mostly for another video that hopefully I will be able to get around to doing. But this is a very fascinating topic. So now I'm going to go into something else, which I was talking about earlier, which is the United Nations 2030 agenda and the World Economic Forum, which I'm not going to go too in-depth in. I know Ward Radio talked about it. There's this idea of a great reset, that there are people in governments who they believe that in 2030, there's going to be a great financial reset. In fact, there's a book that was made by the head of the World Economic Forum, who he writes about this 2030 agenda. And I haven't read the whole book, but some of the stuff, like maybe it's just out of context, actually sounds pretty disturbing. And it talks about how the ideal society is like the Chinese communist state, where essentially they don't have agency. It talks about how it's called COVID-19, the Great Reset, that book, how there's an idea that there would need to be crisis caused in order to usher in this type of society, right? That the government perhaps, might need or might use certain crises, such as a pandemic, to usher in greater levels of control. It also talks about how the ideal population of the world is a fraction of what it would be now. And then that brings us back to Bill Gates, who has talked a lot about how the population of the earth is too big, and his connections with Jeffrey Epstein, where they are talking about pandemic planning in 2017, 2016, which came out in the Epstein files on the official Department of Justice website. And so when we see that this stuff is going on, it again begs the question, like, are we already in Babylon? Are we already in the beast system and we're just helpless to do anything? Right? Because, and I've said many times, I would never do anything to hurt myself, but I don't think that they would take Latter-day Chad, some meme page on Instagram, because so many people already know about the Great Reset. We have people like Glenn Beck talking about it already, right? Who he's done, and he's going to get more views than Zion Media ever will. But here's the real question. If the Antichrist or the beast system is coming, are Mormons ready for it? I'd say no. Absolutely not. I'm serious. Like, you guys need to gird up your loins. And perhaps the Lord, I've had this thought. So we went on a live stream where we talked about a guy who they're calling the Mormon Jeffrey Epstein. You can go check that live stream where he has a lot of connections to the corporate side of the church. He's actually in charge of the open house for the Salt Lake Temple. And he, in like his own journals, in court documents, talks about things such as pedophilia, ritualistic abuse. He talks about how he feels he was foreordained to learn the secret signs and oaths of the secret combinations. Now, this is actual stuff that's out there. But I had a thought. What if the Lord allows for things like that to happen so that the members of the church will wake up? I think the Lord could take care of something like that very easily if he wanted to, but maybe the members of the LDS church are so asleep in Babylon that he needs to shake them up a little bit. I know we talked about on another video with Stanley Heaton, the wife of the end times servant, or the Davidic servant, or both, because Stanley Heaton says they're two different people, who Isaiah 62, Isaiah 62 and Isaiah 54 seem to talk about a woman who represents Zion. And we talked about how the servant's job with his wife will be to wake her up, essentially the same way that the Lord has to wake up Zion. Because so many people are just unaware of this stuff going on. For example, the 2030 agenda that I'm talking about, it is a real thing. Agenda. And it's very interesting with this 2030 agenda, which is connected to things like the Great Reset. We have, wait for it, this is the United Nations 2030 agenda, which on the surface, it doesn't look so bad. Stay updated on Europe's green future. Wow, I would love nothing more than a green future. I certainly would love that. But when you actually look into what it's saying, it has nothing to do with the environment, and there's all this weird stuff about lowering the world's population. They're saying, well, it's because we have to preserve resources. That's sounds like peace and safety is the slogan there. That's very interesting. In fact, David A. Bednar, actually, after the COVID stuff happened, he said that, and there's a video out there of him saying this, that the church's response was the wrong choice and that impended on our rights. Where I don't care if you got the COVID vaccine or not. You shouldn't be forced to do anything in the name of peace and safety, because that is how you manipulate people. And that's the truth, is that I've seen that, like, in personal life. I have seen people who manipulate other people into doing certain things by saying that they're looking out for them for peace and safety. In reality, it's their own selfish goals. So, and I think we all do this to an extent, is we sometimes justify our actions and convince ourselves of stuff, but this is a big line. And so to go into COVID-19, the Great Reset from the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset. So this is a book that was written by the head of the World Economic Forum, which the World Economic Forum is a place where all of the politicians, all the richest people in the world, they all meet here. So that's what it says it's talking about how COVID-19 disrupted our social life. That's not what it's about. Because here's something interesting I found in 2020 when I was researching this. I used the Wayback Machine on Google to do this. The Great Reset was being talked about in 2016, 2017, the same time that Bill Gates was meeting with Jeffrey Epstein and allegedly meeting with Jeffrey Epstein, I should say, and allegedly talking about depopulation of the earth. And so at the same time, the World Economic Forum is releasing things around 2016, 2017 on the internet talking about the Great Reset. I personally went on the Wayback Machine on Google, which, sorry, my nose is just really itchy, which allows you to see websites when they were older, what they used to look like. And the old thing talking about the Great Reset was back then was up there. So what they do in 2020 is they delete all that stuff off of the World Economic Forum website, and they post all of this new stuff, talking about it as that the Great Reset is a response to COVID-19. Okay? And this is, again, going into why I don't trust any politicians, because one of the slogans of the Great Reset was Build Back Better. And we had the Biden regime using Build Back Better as a response to COVID-19. Even though Biden personally wasn't in the Epstein files, as far as I know. But Donald Trump was. And it is Palantir, who is connected to MAGA and Trump, that is doing this suspicious Antichrist-like stuff. So if you're trusting in a political party, if you're saying, well, I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative, maybe you're trusting in the arm of flesh instead of the arm of the Lord, which is the Spirit. Yeah. See what I did there? So this is the book, COVID-19, The Great Reset, and it goes into this. And in this book, as I've got right here, I'm pulling it up. In this book, I don't remember what page it's on. I could look it up, but it does talk about this idea of where coronavirus and the environment, right? So it has nothing to do with the environment, because we have all these people who are concerned about the environment, like Taylor Swift flying around on their private jets to all their award ceremonies, polluting the environment more than 100 or 1,000 of us will in our entire lifetimes. But it does go into this stuff in the original, at least, COVID-19, The Great Reset. I haven't read through this thing. But we also just have the World Economic Forum saying some very bizarre things about God as well. And so I found the original sources on this thing. I had to do some fact checking because I was looking up this quote and everything on the internet said it was fake news. And I couldn't find the original source. I was like, okay, did I actually see this weird stuff about the World Economic Forum years ago? And I believed it was fake news. But I went on DuckDuckGo, which is the search engine that's private, and I did find the original quote and track down the source. So what I was seeing was that the World Economic Forum claims God is dead and that they are obtaining divine powers of creation and destruction. And there is truth to this. So this man, Yuval Noah Harari, he talks about how essentially that transhumanist stuff that Peter Thiel was talking about, of that we are upgrading humans into gods, that the idea of a higher power does not matter, and that he talks about again, we are acquiring these divine powers of creation and destruction. And then after this goes viral, because he did do a conference thing about this at the World Economic Forum, I'm going to try and pull up the video in a second here. All the news just covers to say, to go over this, false claim, the World Economic Forum did not say this and this and that. But it's interesting. So we're putting these pieces together with AI, with Peter Thiel, with Jeffrey Epstein, and it paints a picture of the people who run this society. If you want to talk about the occult, you want to talk about aliens and the occult potentially being like demons or fallen angels or something. There is a famous occultist named Aleister Crowley who had a lot of connections to certain political people, and he also praised Joseph Smith as being legit. He's who the song Mr. Crowley is about by Ozzy Osbourne. And he channeled a being that he called a spirit or a demon, I believe. It was called Lamb, he called it. And it looks, I'm looking it up right now. It looks very similar to what people describe seeing these aliens as looking like. And we have to ask, are these aliens, or are these like some sort of disembodied spirit that people are seeing or being possessed or attacked by? But this is what Crowley is reportedly seeing. And again, he is a famous occultist who was connected to many prominent people. That's what he looks like. And it's interesting. So that's a depiction of what people do. And a lot of the people who are reporting being in contact with UFOs and with aliens, it is in like a psychedelic state, a channeling type state, where they are doing some of the sort of stuff that I talked about in another video. So are these spirits? Are they able to make themselves look that way? Is that part of the great Antichrist deception? Is it going to have to do with aliens? Is it going to have to do with AI? There's going to be a surveillance state? I don't know. I really don't know for sure. Because there's also this idea that maybe when the city of Enoch returns, that they will be on a UFO, right? That is how they descend from heaven. But with all this stuff going on that has been coming out lately, are Mormons ready for what's coming? I would say most of them no. Why? Because they're still under condemnation due to a lack of faith. They haven't received any new revelations in 200 years. And they're also the best bet of people who can actually understand these things, that yes, we do have spiritual power, but also Jesus Christ is real and he is the Lord God, the Son of the Most High. And understanding those things are important, because what happens in is a sort of Protestant tradition is that anytime there is any sort of spiritual power or spiritual gifts, people accuse you of being into evil occult things, just the same way that they accused Jesus Christ of witchcraft, and he said, that's blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. And Joseph Smith, like many people point out, that at least in his younger years, he seemed to be involved in occult or magical-like things. Because if you actually look at what he was believing... Sorry, my phone is going off again. Actually, it's my other phone. So I actually have two phones now, that the people who run Zion Media gave me a second phone for working on stuff for them, because I was just getting flooded with stuff on this phone. So this is my other phone. Here's my phone. Here's my other phone. And actually, I don't have this number memorized, but I will give it out. Maybe Dave Douglas will edit it on screen. If anybody wants to contact me, I'll put it in my Instagram so that, I'm not giving out my personal number and get it flooded with stuff, because this is my corporate phone, if you will, which, because like I said, the people who run Zion Media, they're the ones who recruited Shane. Shane was friends with Trevor somewhat for business reasons before this, and he knew David Douglas. They asked me to come back on and start covering some things, and Shane is going to be on a bit of a hiatus for a little bit if you saw his last video. indefinitely. I don't know when. But the people who run Zion Media Corporate, they wanted me back on. And so if anybody has any questions about certain things, I can't promise that I will always respond quickly. And if I forget to respond, then it's on accident, because I do get frequent messages on my Instagram, which is at Latter Day Chad on Instagram, and as well as text messages throughout the day. And sometimes my text messages get lost in my feed, so I'm not trying to be rude. But I have a specific phone for this sort of stuff that I was given, and that, that's how they talk to me. And so I'm going to actually pull up the number here, because I have saved in my contacts, to give out that number, and I'll put it in there if you guys would like to text me. Again, I can't guarantee that I will respond to everything. And if you're somebody who wants to come on the channel and present something, it does have to be approved with other people but myself. I have some leeway that I want to talk about, but we can't just have anything on specifically without going over it first. And so I'm going to be trying to focusing more on this real world spirituality type stuff, because this is what convinced me that God is real. This sort of stuff, seeing this stuff in the world, seeing that the occult is real, seeing that if the devil is real, then God must also be real. Right? If that sort of makes sense. And so the number for my phone here, my new phone, I don't have it memorized yet. It is on now. It should be edited on the screen if David remembers to do it. 435-279-7697. So that's my second phone number. So if you have any questions, and specifically, if you are somebody who has spiritual gifts, if you have dreams that come true, and it's like, you can actually confirm, like, yeah, there's no way this could be faked, right? If you receive things that you can't explain, if you can do things that you can't explain, I want to hear about it. I want to understand it. I want to hear about your spiritual gifts. If you've had experience through your faith, as they call it, manifestation, through your faith causing something to happen, and are able to do that, I would love to hear about it. Whatever these gifts might be, especially if you're somebody who other people have not been open to those sort of gifts, right? And I'm not saying, like, because I know Zymia got 1 billion emails about this, where I had a dream that this and this and this happened in the future, and it's not something that's actually been shown to happen. I'm talking about like actual real world experiences where it's like, I knew this thing, and there's no way I could possibly know it, or it had to be supernatural, or I have this gift and it can't be faked, or I can sense energy, as some people call it, which I would call your spiritual awareness, like an extension of what you can do. And I'm going to be making more videos talking about spiritual gifts and things like that, because are we going to be ending up with a sort of race of transhumanism, technology versus spirituality, or just spirituality and technology, are they going to work together, right? Because we have this idea of the prophets from the North Country maybe coming in that way. But I'm now going to pull up that video, that clip where this guy is talking, who gave that lecture at the World Economic Forum about these things. All right, so here I found one of the original sources, because again, a lot of this stuff has been cleared out from the internet that I was seeing in 2020 that like made me start to wake up. And then 2022, 2023, even though I admitted there was supernatural stuff that was real, I finally was like, okay, God is real. I admit it. And that really brought me on a search for truth wherever I might find it. And I'm always open to truth wherever it might be found. But this is Yuval Noah Harari from the World Economic Forum.
Even bigger powers than ever before. We are
Is that not? Yeah, it was.
really acquiring divine powers of creation and destruction. We are really upgrading humans into gods, We are acquiring, for instance, the power to re-engineer life.
The WEF is also increasingly hostile to Christianity and other major religions. If you read between the lines just a little, it's clear that the WEF is consciously attempting to supplant Jesus.
I mean, all this story about Jesus rising from the dead and being the Son of God, this is fake news.
Humans are now hackable animals. You know, the whole idea that humans have, you know, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over.
According to the WEF, Jesus is fake news, God is dead, and you do not have a soul. You are a hackable animal who does not have the capacity for free will. The World Economic Forum has spent decades quietly infiltrating democratically elected governments, penetrating cabinets, and wielding an outsized influence on the world from the corridors of Schwab's Swiss hideout in Davos.
So that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are actually young noble leaders of the World Economic Forum.
These tyrants have now become arrogant and sure of their own success. They are no longer hiding in the shadows and pulling puppet strings from behind the curtain. According to Schwab, it is his role to shape the transformation of the world in the current period.
Okay, so I'm just gonna pause this real quick. Like, that dude's literally dressed like he's Darth Vader or something. Like, it's literally like a wizard robe or something. Like, people say that I like dress like an anime character or something. Like, are you seeing the way these guys are dressing? Don't get on my case just because my hair kind of sticks up.
And unsurprisingly, he admires the Chinese system of state-control authoritarianism.
On the G20, you were there meeting some of the leaders as well. Professor Schwab, what do you make of the result? Finally, they put something as a statement, and it seems quite positive with all the voices included.
I think it's positive. It's already positive through the fact that everybody agreed about the statement, which we haven't had the last years. Now the base has been formed, but we have to go one step further. We have to have a strategic mood. We have to construct the world of tomorrow. It's a systemic transformation of the world. So we have to define how the world should look like, which we want to come out of.
Well, I just had this crash again after playing that sort of World Economic Forum clip. So again, Satan must really be trying to interfere or something. But what stands out to me as well is like, yeah, you literally said that God is dead, Jesus Christ is fake news, and that they are acquiring divine powers of creation and destruction. And it matches up with what Peter Thiel is describing. And we know all of these global elites and leaders are tied together. And Jeffrey Epstein, it exposes this stuff. The stuff Alex Jones, again, love him or hate him, he was literally talking years ago about how all the elites are communicating with what he called interdimensional beings, because that's what these aliens, they believe, are. They don't believe they're from outer space. They believe that they're from other worlds and came through dimensions or something. I don't know. I'd have to go back through that stuff. But these are the same people that are, again, preaching peace and safety, saying that the Chinese communist government is ideal. And it's exactly what Peter Thiel is saying, even down to the transhumanism stuff. What's going on here? I don't know. Here's one thing I would say. If this is the Antichrist, there isn't really anything we can do. I'm gonna be honest. We're not gonna be able to like start a rebellion against the Antichrist if it's prophesied to come. But the prophets from the North Country are also prophesied to come. Doctrine and Covenants 77 prophesies that John the Beloved will come. Doctrine and Covenants 133 prophesies of these prophets from the North Country. And Joseph Smith said John was in the North Country with the lost tribes there. Wherever the North Country may be. It may be the North Star, I've heard some people think. That it's in outer space. That's where the city of Enoch went. That it's the terrestrial kingdom, essentially. We don't know. But I've got another clip from that same video to play now. So like I was talking about the Epstein connections to certain people, this video that goes in talks about that a little bit more, about this sort of idea of depopulation, which if it's prophesied to happen, I don't know that there's really necessarily anything we can do, but gird up our loins and become sanctified, because the prophecy is that the tribulation will come upon the whole world except those in Zion. And another thing, when I'm talking about these controversial topics, I mean, I'm sure I'm not going to get really anyone's attention. I'm not anyone important. But if anything were to ever happen to me, if there was any sort of wild accusations out there against me, look at what I've been doing. Look at what I was talking about. And you'll be able to thread things together. Because again, I would never do anything to hurt myself. And that's just putting that out there, right? Because again, and even with AI, we can imagine that enemies of the state or whatever, if this Palantir, which is the name of this evil globe Saruman looks through in Lord of the Rings, this Palantir system were to come about, I'm sure that you would need the constant guiding influence of the Holy Ghost. And here's the thought. When we're talking about stuff like certain controversial people involved in the LDS Church, like that guy who they're calling the Mormon Jeffrey Epstein, could it be that God has allowed certain things to happen so that he can test the discernment of his people? I mean, the temple teaches that a messenger of God might show up without disclosing their true identity. Maybe that means that they don't look the way you'd expect them to look. Maybe they've changed their appearance when they come back down here. So if one of the three Nephites showed up, how would you know? If John the Beloved showed up, how would you know? If Joseph Smith showed up, how would you know? If Noah showed up, how would you know? If John the Baptist showed up, how would you know? You wouldn't, because that's not how God works. So you learning revelation, that is important, because you might be able to fake the intelligence or the mind of man with machines, but you can't fake the Spirit. You can't fake the Holy Ghost. So I think that's why we've been warned that in days ahead, it won't be possible to survive without the constant guiding influence of the Holy Ghost. And like Avram Gileadi has said, the Davidic servant who is supposed to go against the Antichrist or the beast system, and maybe it's by building up Zion, that is what goes against the beast system, and that the beast system eventually collapses in on itself and Zion flourishes. But he is supposed to test the people as well. So sharpen your discernment. Pray about all things. Pray about these things. Ask the Father in the name of Jesus Christ. And I can personally say, God is not dead. Jesus Christ is not fake news. I can personally say, Jesus Christ does live. I can say that I know his face. I know his voice. And that if you have faith in him, whatsoever you ask will be given unto you. I can say, I'll hook me up to a lie detector. I know his face. I know his voice. And he wants to know each and every one of you. He knows you all. He suffered for your sins. He has literally experienced every hardship you've ever experienced. Let me tell you, the bitter cup that Christ didn't want to partake of, it was not him being nailed to a cross. Because there's been people who have had more painful deaths than that. The bitter cup is the atonement in the garden. If you truly understood what happened when he suffered the atonement, it would change the way you view things. In fact, there was a moment in my life years ago that I'm not going to get into details, but it was like one of my lowest, worst moments. And I remember exactly where I was at. And I remember, because again, until about like 2023, 2024, I was spiritual, but I wasn't religious. And the only time I would ever consider God was when I was desperate, when I needed help. I needed God then. And imagine how God feels, that oftentimes we only need him or want him when we need something. And then the rest of the time, our heart belongs to Babylon, to the world. But to go back to that, I remember exactly where I was, laying out in the grass in this field. And I remember just begging him for help about something, for an answer, begging him to show me that he's real. And I remember how much I was suffering then. And years later, when I'm receiving revelation, he shows me that he was suffering that too. That every moment of my life, I've suffered and I've been in pain. He's felt it as well. And the same can be said to you, that there is nobody who understands you better than him. That the Spirit of Christ is in all things and through all things, because he has experienced all things. The worst of everything. The Son of Man descended below all things, truly. And again, when we're talking about this stuff, he's real. I know the Son. Okay? And if you've seen him, you've seen the Father. And I would just like you guys to know that Jesus Christ is real. And do not doubt it. Because I can list supernatural things that have happened to me with witnesses that have experienced those things that there's no possible explanation for. And bear witness of Jesus Christ. So, back to this video about the Antichrist.
Organization is conducting global social and medical experimentation in accordance with the vision of their mega donor, Bill Gates, and his religious faith that he can use technology, vaccines and GMO agriculture to make him the savior of all humanity. Gates' strategy of buying World Health Organization and purchasing control of US health officials like Tony Fauci and Deborah Birx means the Microsoft co-founder can now dictate global health policies affecting 7 billion people and to control the most intimate details of our lives, said Kennedy Jr. on his Instagram page. Just last week, Gates, in his role as false savior, was caught telling world leaders that it's time for death panels to decide who has the right to live and die.
You know, is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better not to lay off those 10 teachers and to make that trade-off in medical costs? But that's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion. So you, of course,
but that's an interesting thing you just said, which is just the last 3 months in life for one person or something, because we haven't had a discussion of how to allocate that money. It means we lay off 3 teachers to do so. I mean, in other words, we haven't had this type of allocation.
We're making that trade-off because of huge medical costs that are not examined to see which ones actually have no benefit whatsoever.
Well,
and because of pension generosity, we will be laying off over 100,000 teachers, which, you know, I'm very much against that. And the whole AFT will agree with me on that.
Of course, Gates' death panels have everything to do with the globalist elite's obsession with depopulation. This is the brutal, soulless world Gates and the shadow government at the World Economic Forum are determined to roll out as part of their Great Reset. We can't allow their evil religion to become the new normal. Take a look at one of the videos in the description box below for a deeper dive into these plans. Forewarned is forearmed. If you understand the importance of these videos in educating the masses about the shadow government and the evil agenda of the elite, please like these videos and subscribe to our channel to help us continue to produce this content.
So we see this stuff, and there's been all sorts of Bill Gates things where he's talking about depopulation. We know he's connected to Jeffrey Epstein. We know that based on the emails, he's connected to Jeffrey Epstein. We know that supposedly he was meeting to talk about things such as a pandemic in 2016, 2017, when the World Economic Forum was first putting out stuff about the Great Reset or the 2030 Agenda. And then again, they deleted the original stuff. I personally saw it, and again, I could take a lie detector test. I'd be willing to, but we're seeing a complete picture that even if you don't believe these things, the people who control the world do. That, like how Aleister Crowley, and again, when I was looking up that lamb thing, let me go back to that. The way Aleister Crowley described this lamb was as an interdimensional being. That's what he described. And so remove this, add this. So no, that's the wrong lamb. It's Crowley. Yeah, spelled his name wrong. But according to Crowley, it was, and I remember seeing that earlier, it was an interdimensional entity or being, or a spirit, if you would, which does match up to a lot of what people think aliens look like. So right here, I've got a clip. Like I said, Alex Jones is a very controversial figure, but he was spot on about Jeffrey Epstein. And even the people who believe, like, yeah, Jeffrey Epstein was doing sex trafficking and stuff when he finally got arrested and admitted that part was right, they said the idea of them doing satanic rituals, which the Department of Justice website now admits they did, was crazy. For example, again, I have this file from the Department of Justice website that is describing how these pedophiles believe that they are possessed by what they would describe as outside entities that feed off of human energy, and in particular, the energy of children. So without further ado, here is the Alex Jones clip where he's basically describing everything that I've gone over in this video over 10 years ago on Joe Rogan, and everyone said it was crazy back then. Just like they said Jeffrey Epstein was crazy back then. All right, so say what you want about him, but this is when he's talking about like what the elites are doing on these islands and stuff, and it is all connected and stuff. It's part of the same conversation.
But there's this big war trying to like basically destroy humanity because humanity has free will and there's a decision to which level we want to go to. We have free will, so evil's allowed to come in.
So that should sound familiar to you if you're familiar with the LDS doctrine, that there's a war going on over agency or free will, and it's a test to see what level we will choose to go to. Sounds familiar.
And contend not just good. And the elites themselves believe they're racing using human technology to try to take our best minds and build some type of breakaway civilization where they're going to merge with machines, transcend, and break away from the failed species that is man, which is...
Again, we have this idea of transhumanism, just like Peter Thiel was talking about, just like the World Economic Forum was talking about, and you're seeing the pieces of the puzzle fitting together.
Kind of like a false transmission because they're thinking what they are is ugly and bad, projecting it onto themselves instead of believing, no, it's a human test about building us up. And so Google was set up 18, 19 years ago. I knew about this before it was declassified. I'm just saying I have good sources, that they wanted to build a giant artificial system. And Google believes that the first artificial intelligence will be a supercomputer based on the neuron activities of the hive mind of humanity with billions of people wired into it with the Internet of Things. And so all of our thoughts go into it, and we're actually building a computer that has...
It's interesting. He's going to say a word. really shortly in this video. He's going to mention a crystal ball. I want you to remember that Palantir is the name of Saruman's crystal ball in Lord of the Rings.
Real neurons in real time that's also psychically connected to us, that are organic creatures, so that they will have current prediction powers, future prediction powers, a true crystal ball. But the big secret is, once you have a crystal ball and know the future, you can add stimuli beforehand and make decisions that control the future. And so then it's the end of consciousness and free will for individuals, as we know, and a true 2.0 in a very bad way, hive mind consciousness with an AI jacked into everyone, knowing our hopes and dreams, delivering it to us, not in some PKD wirehead system where we plug in and give up on consciousness because of unlimited pleasure, but because we were already wired in and absorbed before we knew it by giving.
And so one thing I tell a lot of people all the time is wake up. And this is what I mean, because I've known about this stuff for years. I've known about this stuff for years. And so many people are so unaware of the society we live in. They are unaware of many of these things. And everyone would rather eat, drink, and be merry. And as the Book of Mormon says, that when they eat, drink, and be merry, God must shake the kingdom of the devil to wake them up. So maybe sometimes God himself does things to wake people up.
Over our consciousness to this system by our daily decisions that it was able to manipulate and control into a larger system. There's now a human counterstrike taking place to shut this off before it gets fully into place, and to block these systems, and to try to have an actual debate about where humanity goes, and cut off the pedophiles and psychic vampires that are control of this AI system before humanity's destroyed. Wait a minute.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy to see how spot on that was. Like, pedophiles and psychic vampires, anyway. This is from the Department of Justice website here. And I need to get my mic a little closer now. But this is from the Department of Justice website, talking about pedophiles and psychic vampires. And, like, again, think what you want about Alex Jones. He was spot on about Jeffrey Epstein's island. And this is what he's saying the plans of those people are. And if this truly is the Antichrist, the beast that ascends out of the earth from the Book of Revelation, then is there any preventing it? I don't know. But we know based on the Doctrine and Covenants that those who are in Zion will be safe from the hour of tribulation. So it's important that we understand the prophecies. We focus on our own spiritual development and drawing closer to the Savior and putting off the things of the world and waking up. So you watching this, wake up. All right. Doesn't mean that like it's going to be like an earthquake and everything's destroyed or whatever, but like now is the day to develop that relationship with Jesus Christ. That's what I would say. Or what, we refer to as aliens, because we don't really know what these are. So, and then we have the government. I'm going to see if I can find this. Alien.gov. Is there truth out there? U.S. registers aliens.gov as Trump pledges UFO files release. And I'm going to do a whole video talking about that and going in depth on that. I'm planning on doing that video, and I have a guest who is likely going to come on for that. But there's a very complete picture showing that you can't trust anyone in the government. It doesn't matter if they're Republicans. It doesn't matter if they're Democrats. You can't trust in the arm of the flesh. You have to trust in the spirit. And the supernatural is real. God is real. Like I said, I'm not like a big prominent person or whatever, but I would never do anything to hurt myself. And if any crazy thing comes out accusing me of this or that, like I didn't do it. But yeah. So again, that should do it for this video. To sort of summarize, these global organizations, again, in this book, COVID-19, The Great Reset, I don't remember what page it's on, it talks about how we need a government like China, like a surveillance state. It talks about depopulation. It talks about how a lower population would be easier to maintain and control. And we have, I'm going to show this again, I'm going to pull this up, that file from the Epstein files. I still have it here on Shane's computer, where this was from, again, those emails. They're talking about Bill Gates, who's associated with the World Economic Forum, meeting with Epstein. And then here we have this, which I'm going to full screen my screen to read this, that, again, this is from the Department of Justice website. These elite levels of humanity society, the answer is that entities operating beyond human sight, which mentally and emotionally possess these people, feed off human energy in general. But the energy they want more than anything is that of children before puberty. And it's talking about why there is like pedophilia involved in these sort of rituals, where what you find out is, like Joseph Smith was saying, magic and spiritual things are science that we don't understand, essentially. That there's some dimensional thing going on there, what we would call entities out there, beings of consciousness that are different from us, and we might call those spirits or angels or demons. And perhaps angels are simply beings, well, I would say definitely that they're beings like you and me at a higher level of consciousness. And as I say this, it's 1:16, 1 hour and 16 minutes into the video, but I know there's going to be little pieces that David Douglas has to flip out from it crashing. But I want to hear what you guys think of this. And I want you to really pray. Ask yourself if you are one of the virgins with oil in your lamp, or if you're one of the foolish virgins. Again, gave out my phone number earlier. If you are someone who you're spiritually gifted, I want to hear about it. I want to hear what you can do. If you can read minds, if you can manifest stuff, if you can do whatever spiritual stuff, even if it's weird, if it's not something I agree with, I want to hear about it. I want to understand these things, right? Because again, like, I'm simply just talking about spiritual things, how it's backed by science, and we have people in the comments saying, you're involved in the occult. It's like, no, I'm trying to understand how these things work, because to be like God, the glory of God is intelligence, and you're not going to become like God by not understanding how things work or not having knowledge of good and evil. What does God say after they partake of the fruit? Man has become as one of us, knowing good and evil, right? And so I want to understand. And if you have any sort of spiritual gifts, like legitimate spiritual gifts, I would love to hear about it. I'm going to go to my phone number again, my other phone. And as I said earlier in the video, that number is 435-279-7697. So let me know. And I want to meet with people like this. I already have had people like this meeting me, showing me their gifts. And there are legitimately spiritually gifted people out there who can receive revelation, who are remarkably gifted people. I've met people who they can know specific things about me just as soon as they meet me, things that are like secrets or things I wouldn't openly say, like they could perceive my thoughts almost. I've seen that. And so these things are definitely real. And again, so I'm going to go over. So like the video, that boosts the algorithm. Leave a comment about these things. In fact, if someone disagrees with the argument in the comments, I would love for you to start an argument. The more comments, the more it's going to be boosted. Hype the video. So after you like the video, there should be a little thing that comes up and says hype. Make sure you use your hype points to spread this around. And if you did enjoy this video, share it with just one of your friends. Share it with a group chat of friends. It makes a difference. It really does. And if you have any suggestions, leave them below in the comments. And I hope to get more into some real world spirituality and bringing the fairy tales into the real world. So until next time. And again, Another thing we should be aware of is the Book of Mormon talking about a secret combination in Ether chapter 8, which will seek to overthrow the liberty of all nations. But I will see you next video.
We come with our stories, our scars and our songs. Some weary from waiting, some learning be strong. But love called us here, and we answered the sound of grace drawing circles. No loss can be found.